Wednesday, January 10th was a terrible day for congressional Republicans. Just as rising anti-Trump sentiment has pollsters betting on a Democratic wave, Vista Republican Darrell Issa announced his retirement, potentially handing his seat to the left. And just hours later, the financial issues that dogged Alpine Representative Duncan Hunter result in a subpoena. I'm Daniel Wheaton, and this is Refocus. Micheal Smolens, we're talking to you because political reporter Joshua Stewart is on vacation in Baltimore, but conveniently close to the Baltimore Sun, so he was able to file remotely when the news broke that Darrell Issa was retiring. So
Joshua knows how to live it up on his vacation.
Yes, it's the best, most relaxing vacation you can imagine, breaking such a big story. But you've been covering politics in California and in San Diego for some time, so you do have lots of history when it comes to Darrell Issa and things that he's done. So first, why don't you give us the overview of how did Darrell Issa become such a household name? Because even when you think of California Republicans, he's something that really comes to mind. He's someone who's really defined himself. So why don't you give us the overview of
He has.
Issa?
The brief history is Darrell Issa is a very wealthy businessman. He's the wealthiest person in Congress, that he made his fortune through the electronic industry, particularly with car alarms, the Viper car alarm, which was very popular. He ran for U.S. Senate sort of out of the blue, which was a big leap for somebody that hadn't run for office. He spent $10 million on that campaign in 1998. Didn't make it out of the primary, but he made a name for himself, and he became, very familiar in Republican circles. 2 years later, he got elected to Congress. As he worked his way up, in the power structure, he became chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and that's where we really know him as a national figure. He sort of became the lead antagonist, if you will, of the Obama administration, and particularly Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, going after the emails and the whole Benghazi controversy and so forth. So he was a regular fixture on the Sunday talk shows. Like I said, he was a national figure. At one point, he gave a speech in New Hampshire that sparked some speculation about whether he would run for president at some point. So that's why he's sort of a larger than usual member of Congress for our region. And things changed.
Yeah. And obviously, when he got elected, the political landscape was quite different than it is today. So when it comes to his policies and stances as a Republican, how did he differ from some of his party members today?
Well, Darrell Issa is, a reliable conservative vote on most things. The image that he had is kind of interesting because, and I think he burnished it, that as the partisan warrior. But he also, when it made sense for him and when there was common interest, he would work across the aisles. He wasn't a total partisan warrior. Scott Peters, congressman from San Diego, in a very nice, congratulations on your retirement comment to Darrell Issa this week, noted the various things, including, getting money for the San Ysidro border crossing, working on pollution, working on the nuclear waste issue up in San Onofre that they all worked together on. So there was that bipartisan stretch on things of common interest. Darrell Issa wasn't necessarily more conservative than your run-of-the-mill Republican, if you will. It's a pretty conservative crowd in Congress to begin with. He largely seemed to fit the district, which his 49th district is part of northern San Diego County and southern Orange County. That has been a reliably Republican area for some time, and he was very safe. He had served, this is his 9th term. Up until 2016, he was reelected very, very easily and seemingly didn't have to watch things at home so much, which might have been a mistake, to focus on the more big national picture. But as far as his voting record, it was pretty much in sync with the Republican caucus.
And this last election was a real nail-biter for him with, 1,300 votes that separated?
Yeah, it was the closest, I forget the exact numbers, but it was the closest congressional election in the country. And he kind of got blindsided. For whatever reason, early on when Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016, Darrell Issa got on board relatively early. A lot of people were keeping their distance. He even wrote an opinion piece that ran in newspapers, not only talking about his support, but exhorting other Republicans to get on board. That backfired on him badly, as we now know. I don't think he realized at the time, as a lot of people didn't, that as controversial as Donald Trump would be the anger and the motivating force he would be for independents, Democrats, and some Republicans in Darrell Issa's district.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen a number of groups take aim at that district. Swing Left, Tom Steyer.
Right.
Do you think that was the big reason why he decided to step back off?
Well, yeah. I mean, he from almost the get-go, he was always on the list of most vulnerable congressmen. He was either the number one or among the top. So he didn't even have a chance to regroup after barely defeating an unknown Democrat, Doug Applegate, back in 2016. So it's not a surprise whenever either party has an incumbent in trouble. Mm-hmm. Not only does the other party go after him, but these sort of independent groups, if you will go after him. And famously, this one group flipped the 49th. It's got a longer name, but that's the committee name. Yeah. Actress Jane Fonda put in $100,000, which cost, which grabbed a lot of attention. So, yeah, he was going up against some big forces that he hadn't until 2016. Mm-hmm.
And I guess looking back, what do you think is Issa's biggest legacy for what he did for San Diegans?
Well, I think that he was a leader in Congress, and for the you could argue that did he represent all San Diegans? I mean, obviously, I mentioned some of those things that he did work with people like Scott Peters and some Democrats on, but he had a Republican thrust. A lot of people, his constituents, his supporters, didn't like Barack Obama, didn't like Hillary Clinton, and he went after them. Now, he will argue and has argued that this wasn't political, that there were, obviously policy issues about what the State Department did during Benghazi, and that needed to be investigated. Various, gun buying programs that went haywire under the Obama administration. So he was, saying that I'm doing a transparency kind of approach here and trying to root out wrongdoings by the Obama administration. So that's really his big legacy.
Mm-hmm. And looking forward, what are some of the names that kind of come to mind as to who we might see in the ballot for 2018 in the 49th district?
Well, Democrats have a head start because, as I said, other than maybe his first election, Darrell Issa had not had a real tough opponent for, most of his terms. He could raise a lot of money, but didn't have to spend it. And frankly, why he also became, powerful in Congress is he was able to contribute money to other members. Mm-hmm. That's a way to really gain support internally. There's a few Democrats. Doug Applegate is running again. He announced the day after the election that he lost so close, which was a sort of an overtime election. It took weeks to decide to do the ballot count and the recount. And a guy named Mike Levin, who's an environmental attorney up in Orange County. He was the executive director of the Orange County Democratic Party, And there's a new entry that's gained a lot of attention is Sarah Jacobs. She's related to Irwin Jacobs, the co-founder of Qualcomm, and she had a role, not a huge role, but a role in the Bill Clinton administration. So she's got some political chops, and we suspect some good fundraising base. They've all been raising money a lot for a while. Now there's an opening on the Republican side, and who's going to go there? I don't believe anybody's announced yet, but everybody's looking at Assemblyman Rocky Chavez, who is out of Oceanside, and he's a moderate Republican. He had served as the Veterans Affairs Director for the state of California for a while. And he's Latino, which is not an insignificant thing in Republican politics these days. Mm-hmm. We're also hearing not exactly a perennial candidate, but Carl DeMaio, the current talk show host, former San Diego City councilman, and he has run for mayor before. He, I think, will probably put his hat in. And what's interesting with him is, he's built up a pretty good base over running for Congress, for mayor, city council. But right now, he's in the middle of this statewide campaign to repeal the recent gas tax increase. Mm-hmm. That allows him to build a database of all the people that have signed those petitions. And it's not just locally. Now, how much money are these people going to contribute? Who knows? But that's still going to be very politically valuable for him. So those are the key ones that we're hearing from San Diego.
Mm-hmm. And I guess more broadly, it seems that there's increased discussion of a so-called Democratic wave coming in 2018. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about the chances of them taking back the House?
Well, a year ago, we wouldn't even be, talking about this. They're getting better all the time, it seems. it's not a sure thing. It's a real threat, and I think that must have played into Darrell Issa's calculations because, look, here was a guy that was a national figure. As I said, he was on the Sunday talk shows, weekly or almost weekly, and as I'm doing a column this week, and as I'm writing in it, that even in the best case scenario, he faced a grim future. If he struggled through in one re-election, and if the Democrats took over the House, here he is, a mid-60s-year-old guy. He'd be a backbencher in Congress in the minority party. He was a chairman of a powerful committee. He was a national figure. That's a long way down. And to make matters, I guess, worse, if he did hang on, 2020 would be an even more difficult year because it's a presidential year and more Democrats turn out. And so if Democrats don't flip Congress this year, their chances are even better in 2020. So, what's he looking at? He's looking at a pretty tough existence. And, the president he has aligned himself has been all over the place and has not been helpful to him politically, really, in any way.
All right. Is there anything else that you feel like we need to know about this political development today?
No, read our stories and read Josh's stories. And we'll have several stories this week on this.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Still on the subject of California Republicans, Representative Duncan Hunter had a subpoena issued in regards to some transactions made by his campaign. The Union-Tribune has been keeping tabs on Hunter's questionable spending for some time. Morgan Cook, welcome to the show. Morgan, you've been covering this from the beginning. First, walk us through some of the odd financial issues that Duncan Hunter has had.
What we've been seeing, what we found when we looked through his campaign finance records, were unusual expenditures that we didn't see with other campaigns. For example, his campaign paid for oral surgery and also for his children's school tuition and various other personal expenses from utilities to family vacations, it seems. And it's worth noting that when it comes to campaign funds, you have to use them just for the campaign, correct? Yes, you cannot use them for your own personal benefit or living expenses because there's a risk there that if people can use their campaign money on themselves, then there could be undue influence on them in their official capacity.
And some of these expenditures have been colorful, to say the least, including airfare for a rabbit, if I remember correctly.
Yes, his campaign did pay, I think, $600 in fees for flying a family pet rabbit in a commercial airplane.
So this has obviously come to the attention to authorities, and he's currently under investigation. So why don't you tell us, what exactly does that mean? What could happen to Duncan Hunter?
In this type of investigation, the investigators do their thing. The FBI collects information and they put their case together. And as their case advances, it gets to a grand jury stage, and they can subpoena witnesses to come and testify before the grand jury, provide documents and things like that. And then the grand jury decides if there's enough evidence to bring criminal charges. And if they decide that, yes, there is enough evidence, then they will issue an indictment, which leads to prosecution.
So the subpoena is essentially the first stage of this process, correct? Or mid-stage?
Mid-stage. Kind of late stage, actually, I think.
So as you've been reporting this story, what has been some of the things you're hearing from the campaign? Obviously, they want to contain this information. So how has it been like having to deal with their spokespeople?
I haven't gotten any response from them to our questions, so I guess it's been easy.
That's good. And Hunter has made some interesting comments about the Department of Justice in the past couple of weeks, saying that they're, being a little bit more overreaching than they should be. What do you feel he's trying to get across with these comments?
Well, I think that it's understandable that he would feel frustrated. I'm sure I would feel really, really frustrated. I think it's a really difficult process, and I don't know why. I'm not in his head, but I could see that it might just it has been maybe a year, and these things take time, and just getting closer to election season. So.
True. So what's at stake? What happens if something is found that's questionable?
Well, if the grand jury decides to issue an indictment, then he would go forward. I mean, the next step would be towards a criminal trial.
Mm-hmm. Which obviously for someone having to deal with re-election in 2018 is not something you want to have on the side.
I would not want it to happen to me if I were running for election. But Duncan Hunter is, he's in a really safe district for Republicans, and he enjoys a lot of support there. So I definitely am not qualified to predict the political outcome.
And is there anything else that you feel like we need to know about this story and what we should expect in the next couple weeks?
Well, the next couple of weeks, I don't know. I'm not sure how long it will take for it to come into sort of the public sphere.
Yeah, these machinations tend to happen behind the scene for a while at first.
Yeah, they need to be secret, so they try to keep it pretty secret. Stay tuned. There will be more, I'm sure. So,
Morgan Cook, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Refocus is a production of the San Diego Union-Tribune. This episode was produced by myself, Daniel Wheaton, Laura Hockley, and Lauren Flynn. Please rate and review us on iTunes and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Daniel Wheaton, and this is Refocus.